Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word PrisonPro to 44222. Again, text PrisonPro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you reviewed our podcast and we'll send you a free digital book. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode of Prison Professors. I am Michael Santos, and I want to welcome you to the Prison Professors program. I'm here today with a new guest, and it's a guest that I'm speaking to for the first time. Like most of our guests, he's got some experience with the criminal justice system, and I'm hoping to learn from his story and also reveal some information that maybe we can teach others in our audience from our story. So let me welcome John Rubischko. Am I pronouncing your name right, John?
You said that very well. I'm impressed, yes.
John Rubischko. John, tell us where are you living right now?
I'm currently living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I've lived all over this, a few places in the U.S. and overseas as well.
And earlier in this call, you told me that you've just completed 5 years of supervised release. Maybe we can get to that organically by beginning about your background and what brought you into the criminal justice system in the first place. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about that?
I'll try and do a quick recap of kind of my background. I grew up as a young kid, very into athletics, not great in school, but I really was into athletics. And so I was able to get through high school at the very, C+ average. Got into a good university, played football and tennis at St. John's University in Minnesota. We had a very good team, did very well. Got my bachelor's in international management, lived overseas in London. Wanted to continue that, went and got my master's in Singapore through Syracuse University. Came back, finished it through St. Thomas University here. Didn't complete my foreign language. Then just fuddling around for some jobs trying to figure out what I want to do and be successful. So I saw a lot of my other classmates be successful, and I wasn't where I thought I should be. Headhunter approached me to get in the mortgage business. I'm like, I don't know. That's not where I wanted to go.
What year was that, John, that you got into the mortgage business?
I think 95, 96.
So you were about how old at that time?
25 years old.
So still a young man, just getting out of school, getting your academic credentials and going into the mortgage business. Tell us about how that career unfolded for you.
Well, the mortgage business was, as we all remember before the crash, if you had a pulse and a good credit score, anyone can get a loan. And so obviously the more loans we wrote, the more money you made. And from day one, I walked in and I saw a guy cut and pasting, which is taking an appraisal and forging the appraisal amount. And so I turned a blind eye to it and went, that's him. He can do that. And so I continued on trying to do my own thing. After 2 years, I started my own mortgage company because I had that entrepreneurial spirit and went off on my own. And so it started doing very well. Thought, the more I did well, better things I bought my wife, the bigger house, that the more she had loved me. And it created a cycle of me chasing money that really led to a series of bad decisions that really ended up me getting in trouble.
How many people worked with you in the mortgage business that you started?
I didn't have that big. I mean, it's hard because when I was a good producer, I'm not a good manager. And so I had probably 4 or 5, maybe 6.
4 or 5 people building a good business, earning a good income, and then at some point things start to go downhill when the government comes knocking on your door. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Well, it's really started before that, really, because like I mentioned before, I was chasing money and didn't have a good marriage because I became a workaholic. The more I bought, the more I had to make the next month, and I couldn't keep up. And so I was really trying to keep up and working long hours till 3 a.m. And so my marriage split up. And so I felt like I had to now double my income or find a way to help, take care of her and myself now. And so I try to find new ways to do that. And so I'm like, I'm going to become an investor myself. Because I've worked with so many people that were being an investor before this. Since I didn't have the credit, I had my real estate license and my mortgage brokerage. I asked my mom if I could help, put some houses in her name until my divorce is settled. She was hesitant. She was older. She's like, that's too risky. And I was trying to negotiate and barter with her, aka really manipulate her to get to what I wanted. And so she didn't do it. I went back. My processor went, hey, I could forge your signature on a power of attorney. And in my infinite wisdom, I go, oh, what's the harm? I know all the consequences. I'll do this quick, get out, no harm, no foul. Well, that's the problem. I didn't realize I didn't control all the circumstances that could come about. And I forged her name on a power of attorney, closed on 3 houses, went and told her, said, hey, I protected you. Try to act like a good son, right? I said, I bought some houses in your name, but if anything happens, it's going to be on me. So no worries. I'll take care of all the payments. Well, that's when the crash came. People started calling on her house because of the payments weren't being made. And my siblings found out. They had intervention that got really ugly, and I didn't want to deal with it. And so it ended up just kind of spiraling out of effect there. And my mom went to an attorney to file a police report to get it off her credit. And she just told me, it's like, I'm going to file. And the local police chief says, hey, I want nothing to do with this. It's a family mess. Just figure out a resolution and I'm good. So I'm like, okay, good. Well, one fateful morning, December 21st, 2007, I hear a knock at the door, and 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., I don't know who it is. I said, it's probably a contractor I owe money to. I'm just going to leave it. Kept knocking. Then I heard ruckus. I wake up, go out of my room in my boxers, and I'm surrounded with 30 FBI agents with guns pointed and vests on, and tell me to put my hands up. So that's when I first realized I think I got a problem.
Let me ask you, during this spiral out of control with the debt and all, did you ever have any challenges with substance abuse or alcoholism or anything like that?
I didn't, but as soon as I felt like I was okay, but no, you're right. Actually, think about this. It started before when I was worried about debt. I would start drinking around 3 o'clock in the office because I wanted to numb myself. And it really ramped up as soon as I got into this predicament with the feds. I started to, instead of dealing with my problems, I drank a lot to numb myself so I didn't have to deal with it. And that was a horrible way to deal with things because it just made things worse.
Mm-hmm. And so what happened after these people came to these 30 federal agents came to your house at 6:30 in the morning in December of 2007?
So basically I said, I want to talk to my lawyer. And she's like, well, you know what he's going to say. They tried to do the good cop, bad cop thing downstairs. And, I talked to my attorney. He said, don't say a word. Well, she said, have him call me. So this is a postal inspector who coordinated with the FBI. And he set up a proffer the next day. And he's like, the only way to work with the feds is to cooperate, John. And so I went into the proffer and I go, that night I was struggling going, okay, well, I have all the originals. I thought I had everything planned where I couldn't get in trouble. And that's my limited thinking. And that's what got me into trouble is that, then I came free and just told them everything. They drilled me hard. They saw that I was being honest. And I go, listen, I know 100 people doing worse than I was. I go, I didn't see why this is such a big deal for you guys. I go, there's people doing heck a lot worse than I was. And they're like, well, that's fine. You own a mortgage company. We want to make a name of you because of the mortgage crime that's going on. We need this for the publicity. And I'm like, okay. He's like, you cooperate with us. We'll work with you. So I took that as being, I'm not going to prison. So I went all in going, fine, let's go. So I did 2 years of a lot of in-depth, crazy things, thinking that I was going to be free and clear and be good, but realized the carrot in front of the nose is not always it doesn't turn always out the way you think it will be.
What type of counsel did you have? Do you know if your attorney had much experience in the federal criminal justice system?
Funny that you asked that because I reached out to a friend who's in bankruptcy who knew a criminal attorney. He had some experience. He got me in touch with him. I didn't have a lot of money at the time, paid him what he wanted. He never told me he was in the process of being suspended for not paying his taxes. And he was in Alaska looking for a place because he was running from his problems. Passed me on to his associate who was constantly drunk and really never gave me any guidance. So that's my biggest complaint is that I never had guidance at all. And I was scared to death, never been through it, never knew anyone. And I was looking for help.
We're talking to John Rubischko from you're from Michigan, right?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. So that's one district. It's the District of Minnesota?
Yes. St. Paul and Minneapolis has a district. Yeah. So
he's telling us his story about coming into the criminal justice system, not knowing anything, relying upon an attorney who doesn't have a lot of experience, it sounds like, in the federal criminal justice system. And that's one takeaway that I've already gotten from John's story. If you don't have an attorney who's exceptionally well experienced in negotiating guilty pleas and creating agreements with the prosecutor so that you can get an expected outcome, you're really in a bad situation. Is there something that you learned through that process, John, as you look back, what you would do differently that you might share with some of our listeners?
You nailed it right there, is having the right legal representation is vital. The problem is with the right legal representation, they typically want a lot of money up front. And in some situations, you don't have that luxury.
What did you pay in 2007?
So I paid for my attorney, I paid $10,000.
So that's a very good sign. If you've got an attorney in the federal system that's charging you $10,000, it's a very good sign that that attorney is not experienced in the federal system. To negotiate a guilty plea, of course, it's going to depend on geographical locations, but I would say the minimum is going to be $25,000 for an experienced federal criminal defense attorney, and in an expensive jurisdiction like here in the Central District of California, probably starting at $50,000. So those are really high numbers, and I would say that an individual who doesn't have a lot of cash really needs to be talking to the federal defenders. Some people don't appreciate how much training they have, and I've got an enormous amount of respect for federal defenders. If you've only got 10 grand to fight, you're far better off going with a federal defender who's got extensive experience and practice and training with regard to the federal system. At least that's been my experience. What ultimately happened to you? I know that you said that you cooperated for a couple of years. What ultimately was the outcome?
So basically, I cooperated and I thought I was going to get off. I went to a sentencing and eventually got sentenced to 7 to 8 months. And I was
78 months.
I was blown away.
What were you expecting? You said you were expecting no imprisonment, but were you still expecting that at the sentencing?
I was delusional. And yeah, I was, because of my attorney said he's never seen cooperation like this from anyone. And I'm like, so that to me interpreted like, well, hey, if I've cooperated a bit more than he's ever seen, then I should be able to get a probation or something, right? And
how about the pre-sentence investigation? What did the pre-sentence investigation report suggest?
It had a range. I didn't put much weight into it because it still had in there the 501k and the 35E provisions saying that they can downward depart from that guideline. So I was numb and was kind of didn't want to.
What was the amount of loss, if you remember? It
was a $1.8 million amount of loss. And I had appraisals of the 3 properties I purchased for at the time of the sentencing, it was 1.3 million. So I was assuming 300,000 of loss, but my judge said, hey, I'm not going to give you a penny for any of those houses, which is away from the sentencing guideline. And I couldn't argue it because the U.S. attorney said, remember, I hold your cooperation agreement. If you mess with anything, I'm not going to give you the downward departure. So I couldn't argue with not allowing my appraisals in court, which is a big deal. 1.6 to 1.3, that's only 300,000 loss versus a 1.6 million loss. So with that, the guidelines did state, 78 months, and that was right in accordance with guidelines. And he took offense to it because I came from a background of privilege. I did this against my mother, and rightly so. He came down a little hard on me.
So it'll be really important for anybody who's listening to this story of John to be thinking about what steps can you take at the earliest possible stage to start positioning yourself for the best possible outcome. But of course, a problem with the criminal justice system doesn't end at the sentencing date. You still have to go and serve that 78 months. And it sounds like in your case, follow that with an additional 60 months of supervised release. Why don't you tell us about your experience of going into prison? What did you know about going into prison when you started, and where did you go to get information to prepare you?
Well, as I told you, my attorney was really not a help at all. So I reached out and I looked for some resources online and found a prison consultant that said that he could help me, and I put all my faith into that. And so ended up being very not worthwhile. So I really had nothing to plan for, or nothing really to base it on. I had a sentence. I got mis-sentenced I got told to report to a high security low, which I was expecting to go to a camp, and no one explained why. No one researched why. They just said, show up.
Where did you go?
Forest City, Arkansas low.
Forest City, Arkansas low. And how long were you in the low?
So when I got there, I went to my counselor and went, hey, why am I here? I'm not supposed to be here. She's like, be quiet, go back to your cell. And I'm like, no, seriously, give me something to see. So she printed out something, and I go, well, look at it. Says you sentenced this is my sentencing guidelines. It says Eastern District of Missouri, and it says 178 months. So I did a cop out to the warden, and she's like, yep, you're right. They screwed up at sentencing. We mis-sentenced you. We'll fix it at your next review in 9 months. And I'm like, And I went crazy. I'm like, 9 months? What? And people there told me, like, John, just behave. You're a number now. If you make ruckus in this prison system, they're going to make your life, you know what. And so I had to just sit down, buy my time, and hope for the best. And it was unfortunate, but I had no guidance on the outside to help fix that problem.
So what John's talking about is the custody and classification scoring system, which anybody can look at. If they look at our website at Prison Professors, I would encourage you to educate yourself on the custody and classification system. It's and the Bureau. It's also available at bop.gov, Program Statement 5100.08. It's somewhat complicated, but it does make sense for any individual going into the system to learn about this system and learn what that individual can do to make sure that he's getting the best possible situation. While you were in the low, though, John, tell us a little bit about whether you were able to adjust well or you faced challenges.
Well, that's a little subjective. Did I have nights where I was sitting there freaked out, crying, or trying to hide it? Yeah, I was scared, but I adjusted well. I used the track and I played basketball, and a lot of friends were, because I was a white collar, they're befriending me to try and get some information on how they can be successful upon their departure, and so I started teaching some classes and just staying active. My philosophy was, if I can improve myself mentally, physically, and spiritually every day inside, then it's a good day. And so that's what I focused on, and it really served me well, even though I continued to try and fight too. I had to wait to be able to fight because I was hoping that I was going to get my reduction, and again I still had that hope that I was going to be released any day from the U.S. Attorney.
When you say that you were going to get a reduction, what reduction were you thinking about? A reduction in your custody scoring or a reduction in your sentence?
The U.S. Attorney withheld the 35E 501K for a later date until all the prosecutions were done that were related to my cooperation.
I see. And so you were initially sentenced to 178 months? Is that right? No,
that was what the computer system. They misdialed on the computer system as Eastern Missouri, and they misclicked 178 months versus 78 months.
Okay.
So it was only 78 months. And so they put me into the wrong classification because of the 2 errors that they made at DSCC.
I see. And so after 9 months at the team meeting, did they reclassify you as a minimum security offender?
Right before I got to my 9 months that they were going to said they were going to put me in to fix it, I got pulled out to come back for a part of a how do I say a
you had
hearing.
to go to court.
Hearing potentially. Yes, because of the person I was cooperating against was going to court, and they needed me. They needed to have me there to be able to testify.
Okay, so that was a bit of a challenge as well. Did you have to go through the BOP transit system, going through Oklahoma and all, or how did you get back?
Well, the lucky thing was, it's a good question too, is I got put onto Conair, and they stopped in Rochester, and they were supposed to take me to Oklahoma, but then thank goodness one of the guards realized my destination was Minnesota anyway, and so they held up the plane and called, and they got me off, even though it was possible that I was not going to get off at that time. So they got me off, got me into their detention center, and so I sat out there and waited.
Okay, and so one of the things I want to draw back onto our listeners, if individuals who do face that type of a custody and classification problem, the solution to pursue that is really objective. You can use administrative remedies, which we discuss on the website itself, where we describe how an individual can, if they're in the right, like John was clearly in the right, he would have had no problem filing an administrative remedy to fix that. I don't know whether they would have or not, but there is a process in place, and it just behooves everybody who's going into the criminal justice system, learn as much as you possibly can so that you can get the best possible experience. Okay. How you went to go out on a writ, how long were you back in Minnesota for that trial?
I was in Minnesota for probably about a month. The person cooperated and didn't go to trial, so he pled, and then they had they subsequently had my 35E hearing for reduction at that, like a week or two later then.
And what did they drop the sentence to? He
reduced it 30 months to 58 or to
48.
48, yeah.
So that's a big drop. That's a big number.
Yep.
And did they send you to a camp after that?
So yes, they put me back on, got to Oklahoma, anticipating going into a camp. I go down to El Paso because I put in for Tucson camp because that's where my girlfriend was at the time, and I thought no one here was going to visit me. So I went into El Paso, but the warden has jurisdiction at that time and decided to put me back into low so that I could go and work on Fort Bliss. And so he had the jurisdiction, even though I was designated to the camp in El Paso, he decided to put me back in a low.
And which low were you in?
The Latuna low.
FCI Latuna.
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about that work experience. What was it like?
I didn't mind that because it was nice to be able to get out of the base every day and go work at Fort Bliss and be a part of, commoners and outdoors and not feel like you're imprisoned, even though Fort Bliss was in the middle of a desert, 115 degrees with swamp coolers, and you just sat up night and just sweat. You totally was just sweating every night. But it kept busy, and that was nice because I kept busy and it made time go quicker. And after that process, I started doing my appeal, because I felt like my plea agreement wasn't honored the way it was structured, and that I should have got a pre-sentencing reduction into sentencing, and then later the 35E, and not just one. And plus I didn't get the fair market value. So it was giving me hope where I worked on my pro se appeal, but I learned a hard lesson about the whole appellate process and that as well.
Some people might call that therapeutic litigation. What John was looking for was just some type of way to get through this sentence, and filing motions in court that really don't go anywhere can sometimes give them the hope that they need. We would encourage people to find another way to create that hope. I think a lot of our listeners who have not been experiencing the criminal justice system before, John, might have some interest in learning a little bit about that process of living in a prison and then working on the base. What was the process for that? What time did you wake up in the morning? How did you get from the prison to the base? When did you come back to the prison? What type of searches went on? Help us understand that.
Yeah, so basically you would get up. I think you would leave around 8 a.m. So you get up for your morning breakfast around 6:30, have breakfast, get dressed, get to the gate. They would check you out at around 8 o'clock, and the fort would have a sergeant or some other officer there to pick you up in a van.
Was there no searching going on then? You said they'd check you, but did they do any searches, or was it a random search? How did they process that security control in the prison, low security prison?
Yeah, leaving the low, they really didn't bother. They just checked you. They give you a big lunch, and they kind of just assume that you didn't have anything on you to leave, so they let you kind of just as random, but they just let you go out, as far as what I recall, if I'm mistaken. But coming in was obviously different. So we would get back in around 3:15 before the 4 o'clock count, and we'd have to go through a nice full strip search every time coming back in, which was not a pleasant ordeal, but oh well.
Every day you were strip searched 5 days a week when you finished your work detail?
Every day.
And the work detail itself, what did you do on Fort Bliss?
Basically did a lot of landscaping, took the blowers, cut lawn, raked leaves, trimmed trees, any kind of work that they didn't want to do, shovel rock, kind of all over the place. Whatever kind of grunt work that they wanted, we would just take and do. Did
they make you wear one of those uniforms, like the orange vest that says BOP inmate or anything like that, or was it just you're wearing your BOP uniform?
We wore the brown khakis, so we kind of blended in with some military personnel. They obviously knew if we had those on where we were from, but we didn't have the bright orange or the bright striped or anything like that really jumped out too much.
And then you said that you went back to the low. How long did you have to stay in a low security prison before you were assessed again, or were you ever assessed again with regard to being camp eligible?
So another great question. Thank goodness for this, though. I was fighting to get into RDAP, and because the BOP said that I didn't have any prior history of RDAP, but before going in, I was lucky enough to have a licensed psychologist certify me as having an alcohol issue, and him sending that in, I was able to get into RDAP, and then by that means, since RDAP wasn't at that facility, they transferred me to Lompoc, and I was able to get into a camp, thank goodness.
What year was that?
2011, 12.
Okay. I was in Lompoc camp for a while before then, though.
Okay.
It's important to provide some information to our listeners who may not know what you're talking about with regard to RDAP. Tell us what it is, and tell us what the counselor said when you initially asked to participate.
So when I first petitioned in, they said they give you an interview process. She looks up at your history, and because even the judge's clerk said, I've never had a speeding ticket before, never had anything wrong, never did anything wrong. And so they looked at my profile and my case file and said, no, there's no history of any abuse or you of any substance, so we're not going to warrant you for this program. And she says, case closed. And so then I go, well, excuse me, but I have a licensed psychologist. And she's like, fine, as long as we have something for the file, you're good. We'll get you in. Just get us something in and you're good. And so I had to fight and go through back because my consultant wasn't returning phone calls of anyone. And so I had to go back and find that counselor's name and get him to send it in. And so I didn't get the full 12 months. I got 10 months, but at least the process worked and I was able to get transferred out on a Greyhound to Lompoc, and I was happy.
So a couple of things to clarify there for people who don't know the prison system. He's talking about the residential drug abuse program. And the reason that it's so important to John is because, or any other person in prison, is because those who finish the program will become eligible for up to a year off of their sentence in an administrative manner. The challenge, as John just articulated, is that if the documentation hasn't been done correctly in the beginning, then they can find some resistance inside of the Bureau of Prisons. The Bureau of Prisons is designed to receive, not necessary to let people out. And so you got to go into this system expecting to face resistance and obstacles and challenges. And John certainly experienced that through his journey. But you eventually did get to a camp. What kind of experience did you have once you got to the beautiful Lompoc camp in Santa Barbara County?
Well, it was a breath of fresh air because of it's a different lifestyle than what I was put into, and people that haven't experienced that luckily don't understand that maybe fully. But the freedoms that you get, it's a night and day difference. And so I was able to go work on Vandermeer Air Force Base for a while there until I got into the RDAP, which is the different camp facility. And a lot of people talk bad about the rigor and the structure and how they micromanage you for a reason. But yet I saw it as a saving grace because it's the best thing that I could have ever gotten into because it really gave me the tools and the mindset and the ability to be successful coming out.
And we're hearing that from a graduate of college, a college athlete, Division I schools. I mean, just somebody who's really built things. But we learned something. If you go into the prison system with the right mindset, you can pull out of it. Is everything going to be valuable? Probably not. But you can pull what you want, and you can use that in your life and get your mind on track and kind of recalibrate. That's certainly what we try and share with prison professors, and I'm really grateful to John for sharing his story. Tell us, there was one other thing that I want him to elaborate on for somebody who might not know, and that is, he said that he transferred from Texas to Lompoc on a Greyhound. What was that about?
Oh, I looked forward to that because when you change classification, you're minimal risk, and so they transfer you. Then instead of the airplane, they put you on a Greyhound. And so I was released at 8 a.m. and picked up the bus at noon, and transferred all the way to Lompoc, and got to enjoy the stops. Gave me some money for McDonald's, and so again, food from the outside. Oh, it was a well looked upon trip.
If you're going into the prison system, you might spend $100 for a Whopper. You're just so excited to get an American cheeseburger when you're on the road for a while. So I can certainly understand that the joy of getting food after having been incarcerated for several months. John, you finished your time in Lompoc and returned home to where you are now. Did you have to go through any type of alternative housing, like a halfway house or home confinement? And if you did, tell us a little bit about that.
I did. And one note too is when things started to change with me is when I took responsibility. When I stopped fighting and finally just said, you know what? I did what I did to put myself on the radar and to be able to do this. The freedom at that camp, that it changed my life perspective. And so I was, just doing what I needed to do. And so they put me on a Greyhound bus for 3 days back to Minneapolis. I did have to go to a halfway house. I didn't have any family members that would let me home confinement. So I had to do my full 6 months in that halfway house. And I think that was worse than prison, actually. So
you thought the halfway house was worse than prison. Could you give us a little bit of clarity on what that means?
Because of the fact that you're in a tight house, on top of each other with no rec yard or ways to get away and just have that freedom. It's the facilities, the prison facilities are much bigger complexes where you can get away and have freedom of movement. Have what else you did in that respect, because you're on top of each other for meals and sleeping and eating and TV, and it's just a tougher environment. But I was able to get a job that got me out of there always. And so I was excited to work 10, 12-hour days. I didn't care because I could have a cell phone, I could get out, and I was just happy to work. Even though it was pulling sheetrock and wet carpet from ServPro, it was worth it.
It sure was worth it. And you said that you had to do the entire 5 years on supervised release. May I ask why there was never a motion put forward to terminate that supervision early?
I tried to do that. I've done a lot of speaking, a lot of engagements, a lot of positives in the minds of the court and my probation officer. And he tried to do it for me, but the judge said because I owe restitution that he would not consider me for any early release because of that.
And the restitution that you owe, what have they been trying to extract from you every month?
Well, I don't know. Well, it's kind of out of the 1.6, it's been $60 a month.
So $60 a month, I know doesn't sound like it's much on the 1.6, but it's not easy to do when you're just getting your life back in order. What kind of work are you doing now?
So basically, this is the ironic thing, is obviously I went in because I took my mom's identity and created identity theft and wire fraud. I am now doing twofold. I'm helping people, educate them with financial education services, helping to protect them against identity theft, helping to fix their credit, which is the main reason I was in for, and to protect everyone in the staff. So I'm helping people fix their credit, get back on track on their financial life, and I use my experience of, don't do what I did. Let me help you avoid making mistakes and pushing the envelope and to help people fix their credit and get back on track. And I also do some real estate education systems where obviously I did it the wrong way and there's a good way to do it. And I have a lot of knowledge of credit and real estate. So I love helping people get on track and get the home ownership and things that they deserve, because there's, I've realized having that conviction on my record, I couldn't find rental places. I couldn't find jobs. It's hard. And so I want to help people not feel that frustrated, because you're going to get kicked down by a lot of people and judged by a lot of people. And there's ways around it, though.
Very valuable insight from John Rubischko, who's telling us not only does a prison term result in you being incarcerated, but there are collateral consequences that follow, including potentially having problems getting rental agreements signed, getting into business again, finding jobs. And so those are areas that we try to provide as much insight as we can with prison professors. And I just want to thank you, John, for sharing your story with us. It's an inspiring story. I can tell in your attitude and in your lust for life that you're going to move beyond this. And I wish you nothing but success along the way. Do you have any final words that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and I like the fact that how you're really being out there and just heading this front on about the situations and how bad decisions can happen to people, and it doesn't have to be a life sentence, and you can move past it and really I know a lot of people that hide from it, and that's easy to do, but it doesn't mean it's healthy. And it's just helping other people get what they want and get ahead. People don't have to kind of go through my struggle and hardship that I had to. And I look forward to helping people out any way I can for my journey, because there's a purpose for what I had to go through, and I want to help share that with other people. So.
As an old Chinese proverb says, if you want to know the road ahead, ask somebody who is coming back. And we've just heard from John Rubischko, who's told us his story about coming back with the right attitude and making things happen. I am Michael Sanchez with Prison Professors, and we'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest. Thank you. Every day we bring you another story about how to overcome struggle and conquer imprisonment. If you're finding inspiration in these stories and finding a good message, please help us by subscribing to the Prison Professors podcast on iTunes or wherever you subscribe. And if you'd like to learn how we can help you, please text the word Prison Pro to 44222. That's text Prison Pro to 44222, or visit us at prisonprofessors.com.